Just hours ago, 5 former U.S. ambassadors to China met in New York to discuss U.S.-China relations, and Li Tan was there. So the question is, what issues were discussed? Li-Ling?
Yes, Phil, this was really an opportunity for all 5 of the former U.S. ambassadors to China to share their experiences with members of the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations. But what was really weighing on many people's minds were recent developments that threaten an already testy Sino-U.S. relationship. The first, of course, was the recent charges of cyber espionage filed by the U.S. against 5 Chinese military officers. This was a question raised at the end of the session, and unsurprisingly, most of the ambassadors deferred to John Huntsman for a response. The ambassador had just written an op-ed published in the Washington Post on Wednesday. His position was that China has for 40 years been stealing American intellectual property, but he made a point to distinguish between espionage, which he says countries do to each other, and the theft of American intellectual property, saying that many of the reports have only served to confuse the two. He emphasized the damage done by the act of simply ripping off innovation, trade secrets, and good ideas that result in jobs and creating the industries of tomorrow. He said that with much of this intensifying, especially over the past 8 years, he's surprised more was not done before. But he said that now the American business community has reached a boiling point and is willing to get very specific in targeting certain intellectual property cases because of the potential damage to America's long-term economic prospects. Also, China's territorial disputes with its neighbors in Asia was an issue that was touched on several times, and notably in the context of what kind of advice they gave current ambassador Max Baucus about paying attention to regional geopolitics. That when he began his service, he should not just focus on China, but also on its relationships with its neighbors. Ambassador Gary Locke talked about how despite these territorial disputes with Vietnam, Japan, and the Philippines, China continues to build trade relations with these countries, and it's a balancing act between politics and economic realities. And that really was the takeaway here, that Sino-U.S. relations is a balancing act beyond just the bilateral relationship. Phil?
Li Tan, thank you. It is certainly a complicated relationship.